Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. So one reason they suppress my videos has to do with real world application. So in other words, if somebody was to tell you that they're going to wait for somebody to walk on water to fix the economy, okay, you'd say, hey, that's crazy, right? And so it is with the church's explanation of the Bible, okay, the synagogue's explanation of the Old Testament, the Torah, the Tanakh, and the Muslims' explanation of the Quran. Right? It doesn't have real world application. It has fantasy application, and on a spectrum. Some of them are far more into fantasy role playing than others. So that's what I mean by theater arts and propaganda. I'm sure you people who were watching it before got that the first time. Okay. So in the Bible, Jesus is basically talking to a bunch of people who are best described as mildly monotheistic to very atheistic, right? And perhaps if I was going to choose one term for them, they would be agnostic. They don't quite believe. If they believed, they would be scrambling to do the right thing. So they're breaking the greatest commandment. And if they followed the greatest commandment, they would have seen that he's a righteous person. They would have followed him. That's what he meant in John 8 when he said that they're the children of the devil. Okay? And it also goes for the Gentile. Because they didn't believe him. If they loved God with all of their heart, they would see things a certain way and they would see that righteousness in him. And this is part of where we see the failure of people, right? Their frontal lobe, prefrontal cortex. When we look at it in terms of neuroscience, it's very obvious as well that there's a certain failure when it comes to their brain activity, brain function, brain structure. Their brain isn't working that well. And their brain isn't working that well because they see things a certain way that is forging their brain. For example, if I think, hey, I want to do martial arts, right? And I start doing martial arts for years and years and years like I did, my body starts being formed a certain way. And the brain starts being formed a certain way. When people see things like they want to be a jock, a rocker, an emo, a cop, a this, that, and the other thing, their brain and body are formed a certain way. So when you hear my arguments, right, when I cite the Bible where it says, why don't you judge for yourselves what is right? Stop judging by mere appearances. Instead, judge correctly. First, remove the log from your own eye, then you'll see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Are not two sparrows sold for a penny? Okay, and so on and so forth, right? If you don't believe me, believe the works. These are logic-based statements. These statements aren't Jesus waving a magic wand and saying, do you see it now? They're logic-based statements. And when the disciples were being taught, when they started seeing things differently, it was after hours and hours and hours of him teaching them things. And they're even calling him teacher. And then they start seeing things differently. They start turning over a new leaf, walking the straight and narrow, what have you. That's what the Bible is in a nutshell. Now, for those of you who believe that people in church touch somebody and they cast out some spirit and their life changes, okay, that's what's called the placebo effect. Placebo. Scientists have studied Christianity for a long time, and there is no scientific evidence that Christian miracles exist. There's evidence that the placebo effect exists. The placebo effect isn't just in the churches. If someone gave you a sugar pill and you thought that it was a pill that solves some symptoms, it might very well work to a certain extent. Okay, and the placebo effect is a plan works for the placebo. So if you place somebody who is actually the cure, okay, and you have them lie to people, okay, which is a horrible and evil thing to do, a despicable thing to do, I would never do, then they might actually think they're being cured to a certain extent. It's called placebo. And Ebo is my father's tribe. Ebo spelled backwards is Obi. Obi means King Heart Hut, Essence Center Temple Cure and Core. And Obi in Japanese means built, right? Kuro Obi, black built, right? Cure, Obi, right? So the king is the cure because if the true king is really sent there by God or he really knows what he's doing, he's going to help you solve your problems. So it is the essence, the heart of the matter. It is the cure that comes from the essence or the heart of the matter. Thus, it also means cure relative to being the center. Okay, so we see in the Bible it says that in the Lord's hand, the king's heart is a stream of water that he channels to those who please him. So the most righteous person ever, in complete submission to the Lord, is like a stream of water, right? Drink from my well, a stream of water that God is controlling. So God has given you commands through me. And those commands include commands in regards to dating. And there's a bunch of porn stars who don't like it. There's a bunch of, good old boys who don't like it. Racial supremacists. The word rapist is like the word racist. The word consent. A bunch of people in social clubs who want to control socializing and fraternizing, right? Fraternities and who fraternizes with who. There's a bunch of LGBT people who don't like it. There's a bunch of kind of communists who don't like it. Feminists. There's a bunch of people who don't like it. Okay? Now, just like with prison, there's a bunch of people who are basically being evil who would rather not be evil more than not. But they have some kind of complex induced into them, right? The state has purposely triggered their complex so that they're moving in a way that is not logical. And I'd love to talk to you more about that, but I'm going to wait till people are mature enough to hear some of those things that need to be discussed here. So going back to the heart, right? So why am I the cure? Okay, well, look at the entire world. Everyone on this planet doesn't know what the hell they're doing in life but me. And millions of them pretend that they do. The people in the church don't know what they're doing. They're yoked to the Pope or some Protestant group. Okay, they're all cheating me. And it's open and shut. Okay, they're running like a racket. They're all arguing in their own way that their churches magically have it right and the others don't. And sometimes they get together and say, hey, when people think about that, they realize that all the churches are wrong because none of them stand out. None of them are a lamp on a stand. They all are similar to each other. And all of them are full of problems that are easily preventable if somebody has a logical leadership and is willing to die for God, what have you. So the churches are like a big racket. And it's so obvious when you look at it in terms of history, right? The history of the church is confessionalism, the Reformation, the Counter-Reformation. These were very corrupt processes and time periods and events. The Inquisition, the Klan. Who was the Klan? The Klan were a bunch of people from different Protestant churches, including preachers and church staff. And they got together to do evil things out of selfishness. Okay? But the Protestants generally aren't evil. Why did they allow for the Klan? Remember, the church is supposed to be a holy place. It's supposed to be willing to die for God. Why were they all so quick to join together and persecute black people first and foremost specifically? It goes back to that word placebo, right? The place-ebo. And the observe, obi serve. Okay? And the obverse, the principal design, obi verse and obi serve scrambled, and so on and so forth. Right? Obey and obeisance. So we see without fail that there's one person insisting on this argument, as far as anyone knows, on the entire planet, and that's me. The argument is sound. It lines up with the wordplay, which was made by other people who are almost certainly not black. They were English. They were Jews. There are other things. Now, also, when's the last time you've seen someone who is honestly and in a way that's believable and respectable, trying to get people to rally together to address the hormone blockers, the fuming and the poisoning? So they're making people gender neutral with fumes and poisons. They're blocking their hormones. I mean, think about it like this. Why, when they started bringing out these hormone blockers, didn't they first discuss it publicly and make it a big issue? It's a huge issue. If, say, a quarter of the population starts taking hormone blockers, it's going to have this catastrophic effect on the human genome, right? Epigenetics, right? The generational effect of hormone blockers. The side effects are through the roof. There's no other way to look at it. So why didn't they discuss it thoroughly? Why didn't they discuss it thoroughly when they were doing child sex changes or sex changes in general or coerced salpimectomies, right? Getting people's tubes tied in the women's prisons, like in California, and they're raping women left and right, and because they go behind your back and they manipulate your physiology and they create biological dysfunction, then turn around and say, hey, I'm more healthy than this guy, you should date me. Just like they did with AIDS. They give all these people AIDS all over the world, Puerto Rico, Africa, Brazil, what have you, to a large degree, and then they turn around and say, well, those people have AIDS, you're better off with us. That's what they've been doing. They never stopped doing it. And when it comes to messing up people's hormones, okay, and what to do about it, we don't see people saying, hey, you need to actually come together and be willing to die for God on the drop of a hat. People will say things like there's chemtrails and there's processed foods. That's nowhere near enough. I'm the one who goes the distance. Therefore, I have earned the right to be the one that you find dependable and reliable. Okay? And if people were to zoom in on me and say, hone in on me and say, I'm going to listen to this guy, they would see that my arguments are sound and the government is doing petty stuff to try to confuse them. Maybe they'll try to smear me. Maybe they'll try to say this, that, and the other thing. They'll try to say he has AIDS or something. If they gave me AIDS, so what? Maybe they'll try to say, that he's a rapist or, he's a serial killer or whatever, right? They'll say he's a Chinese asset but all that's, even if you believed all that stuff, the bottom line is what I'm saying is true. That stuff isn't true, but what I'm saying is true. And when you look at the history of the things that I've been saying, they've been accurate. And more importantly, is I've been pointing to the solution, the soul you shun, which is me, and the actions you must take. While everyone else just kind of puts information out there and says, oh, shucks, people listen to me, and I'm not going to do anything with it. Right? The one who much is given, much is expected. And so everyone who's famous right now has shown that they're unreliable, they're undependable, they're a fool, they're without moral direction. They don't know what to do. And they won't debate me because they're in a cult that's telling them to not listen to this guy. We see time and time again, they're famous, they're not famous, they come across my videos, they come across the gang stalk, and they're in a cult, what have you, that they just go along with it. Because that's what undependable people do. That's what people who are unreliable do. That's what people who don't put God first do. It's like in the churches, when they put their church and their ego first, they refuse to obey God through me because they put their church or their ego or their cult or their fear or their temptation first. What they're tempted to do. They don't put God first, or they respect the one who's established the throne in righteousness to the point that they would obey God through me. So they're undependable, unreliable, and therefore they're unworthy.